So today we're going to be covering five key topics. We're going to start off with introducing what is measure and grow, and then we'll take a look at how do we go about measuring competency and what is competencies. And then we'll look at facilitating the SAFe assessments. So how do we actually go about executing those assessments within an organization, and a couple different options of how to go about that. And then we'll take a look at identifying growth recommendations. So once we've run the assessment, what do we do with the information? How do we identify where we need to make improvements and what those improvements are going to be? And then we'll finally take a look at an actual demo of using comparative agility to execute the assessments and what that looks like, and the power and the functions within comparative agility. All right, so let's get started off with introducing measure and grow. What is measure and grow? Well, we start off with taking a look at, what is the ultimate goal of agility in our organization, or looking at implementing SAFe and doing a SAFe transformation. We don't want to transform just to say that we're doing something different, right? Or to say that we're doing the cool new buzzword, that's going around the industry. There's a purpose. Purpose for that is to achieve what we call business agility. Business agility is that ability to compete in today's digital age, to be able to understand and monitor and react to the market changes that we sense in our market and in our industries, and be able to respond effectively, to be able in time take advantage of those emerging opportunities and be able to actually be successful with our business solutions. That's really the ultimate purpose that we're targeting. And in order to do that, we need to be able to have the information and have the data that tells us what is happening in the market and what is happening within our organization, and our ability to actually meet those market changes. And that's what measure and grow helps us to do. It gives us that information and the metrics that we need to be able to make those adjustments. So how do we go about doing that? Well, in SAFe, we have what we call our three measurement domains. This is really our model for how we go about measuring and growing within our organization. It's comprised of our three different domains. We have competencies, which is all about our proficiency in the organization to actually implement lean agile practices. So the proficiency of those lean agile practices and how they enable our business agility. We, of course, have our outcomes, which is, do our solutions actually meet the needs of our customers and of our business? And then we have the domain around flow, which is how efficient is the organization at actually delivering value to the customer through those defined steps of our business agility value stream that you see on the screen there. Today, we're going to focus on the competency area and being able to actually measure the competencies of our organization and how proficient the organization is in those lean agile practices that really help to enable that business agility. So what is measuring competency, or how do we go about measuring competency within the framework then? Within SAFe, we have what we call our business agility competency measure, followed up by our 7 core competencies. So within the framework, we have it broken down into 7 core competencies that we've found that an organization really must master these competencies in order to achieve that overall business agility. And our business agility competency first takes a look at overall kind of a high level view of the organization. How are we doing towards overall business agility in each of those 7 core competencies, and how they roll up to achieve that overall proficiency of the organization in enabling business agility. So the business agility assessment comprises, as I mentioned, each of those 7 core competencies. It takes some of the high level views of that, and it assesses across each of those areas, and it's done in a way that the statements within the business agility assessment don't have any SAFe terminology within them. In other words, you can actually run this assessment with leaders in your organization that maybe haven't even had any SAFe training and don't understand all the jargon around SAFe and all the buzzwords and acronyms and all of that. It's been completely removed to where it is in language that pretty much anybody can understand to be able to answer from a high level perspective, how are we doing at each of these areas when it comes to our continuous learning culture or our team and technical agility, maybe looking at our lean portfolio management. So all of these different areas, and it helps us to create a baseline for where are we at in our organization today and be able to understand what is our starting point moving forward, and then where do we need to start to focus in order to actually be able to move the needle towards that overall business agility. So we can take this as that baseline and then be able to determine which area do we want to target first. And this assessment is available in multiple different languages. So we have in English, obviously, and then I believe Japanese and Spanish and French and a whole bunch of different languages. So it can be used, wherever you're located in whatever your language is within your environment there. Then once you've done that baseline with that business agility assessment, and you've targeted the one or two areas that, okay, we're not doing quite as well in this area as we are in some of the other areas, then that gives us the opportunity to then take the assessment that is specific to those areas that we want to target for improvement, such as the team and technical agility assessment that you see on the screen here. And what this does then is it takes that one step deeper. So we move out of kind of the high level kind of questions that give us a general understanding, diving now deep into that specific core competency and all the domains within that core competency, getting some real specific statements to give us some specific information on how we're doing in that competency and which areas of that competency we then want to actually target for improvements and growth opportunities in our organization. So it really helps us get down to that deeper level and give us the information that we need to get the actual improvement items into our backlog and be able to start executing against those in our organization. So how do we go about then doing these assessments, and when would we want to go about doing the various assessments? So there's several scenarios that we recommend that you take a look at for when you would execute the various assessments and which ones you would want to target and run. Our first scenario being to kind of build that sense of urgency for a transformation and get our initial baseline. So if we're trying to gather the evidence for, do we actually want to implement a transformation in our organization to be able to implement SAFe and be able to start that journey and that path, and to understand why do we want to do that and where are we at today, getting that baseline. That's our scenario number one there. Then for scenario number two is to be able to support art and team improvement. So once we've launched some arts, we have our teams formed and we've gone through the base training and really started that journey, then we want to start to dive in a little bit deeper and be able to support them in their execution. And then scenario three is once we've got some time under our belt there, and we've started down that path a little bit further, and now we're looking at, okay, how do we step up into the larger value stream and look at the bigger systemic improvements that need to happen in the organization? Then that's our scenario three, of which we would execute there. And then finally, scenario four, looking at measuring our LPM performance. How are we doing at our portfolio? What does that look like? And we have our scenario there for that. And then the fifth scenario, accelerating into that business agility. So once we've established our first kind of baseline. We've got some growth within a couple teams or arts that we've launched, and now we're looking at how do we expand this out into the broader organization. How do we how have we progressed compared to our baseline, and then moving forward, what are the other areas that we want to target in the organization for our scenario 5? Each of these scenarios, I'm not going to drain through all of these slides for these scenarios, but we have made them available with the recommendations of who are the participants that you would want to participate for this particular scenario. So who do you want to be there when you're creating that baseline? What are the types of leaders and change agents, business owners, and stuff like that that you would want to participate in actually taking that assessment? What's the purpose of this assessment? What's the purpose that we're doing this one, at this particular scenario? So we see here, we're trying to help for that urgency for change, get that information that we need to show the evidence that, yeah, we do need to do something different than what we're doing today. And then what assessment would you want to run for this particular scenario? So we see in this case, it's for the business agility assessment to be able to get that baseline. And then some facilitation considerations. How would you go about doing this? Do you do this with individuals? Do you do this as a group? Do you, what does that look like? And how would you go about facilitating that particular assessment? So it gives some recommendations there. And then how often you would want to do this. So we see this for scenario 1 here, creating the baseline. Scenario 2, in measuring art progress. So you can see again, those participants, the purpose, what assessments would you run? You can see we've got several different assessments for scenario number 2, looking at that lean agile leadership, the agile product management, team and technical agility, and leveraging the DevOps health radar, and some of those facilitation considerations there. And of course, the frequency on this is, probably every other PI, so that we don't, overburden the organization with, too many assessments, running them too often, but getting just enough to where we can actually monitor the data and see the improvements that we're making and see the progress as we progress through there. Then scenario number 3, and again, I'm not going to drain through that, but you can see all the assessments, the participants, and so forth. Scenario 4, we have some recommendations there, and then also finally in scenario 5. So now that we understand, the different scenarios and who we would want to participate in the assessment, the question is, how do we actually go about executing the assessment itself? And to do that, we have 2 main approaches that we recommend in executing the assessments. The first one being act and then discuss. And what this really is taking those assessments, sending it out to the individuals that are going to participate in the assessment, let them read through the various statements, provide their answers on that. And once they've done that, then as a group, have discussion around their answers, discussion around what were they thinking, why did they select the answer that they selected, what does it mean to them in their context, and being able to kind of bring all those data points together and understand the reasoning around that and what we're going to do to move forward based off of the information there. That sort of a facilitation mechanism can be a little bit more difficult because you could potentially end up with people having different understandings of context and possibly provide some different answers based off of that. So that one can be effective, but I usually recommend that one being for once you've done your first execution, then you could do that to be able to follow up on some of those additional executions. The main one that we really recommend is the agree and then act. And what this is in this approach is getting together first as a group and discussing the assessment and discussing all of the statements within the assessment and asking a few things about that. So some of the things that we would ask around this is, what does this statement mean in our context? So if we were looking at the team and technical agility, where the team regularly demonstrates an integrated solution, what does that mean? What does regularly mean for us? Is that weekly? Is that monthly? Is that yearly? What is our context within that? And what is our ultimate goal that we're really targeting to achieve? Why do we even care about this? What is that desired state that we actually want to achieve, and how that benefits the organization? And now we have a good context and a base understanding for the organization as to what it is that they want to achieve, and what the scale looks like from good to better to best, and where we're going to actually answer within that, and an understanding of what that scale means within our context. So this takes a little bit longer initially to execute in this fashion, but it really helps you have a common understanding, a common context, and the data that you get out of that then is a little more easy to utilize, and you tend to have better agreement around where we're actually at, and more meaningful data to actually be able to execute against. And then you can follow up on the subsequent ones with the other format, because we've already had the discussion, maybe some reminders of the context, but then just kind of send it out, let them fill it out, and it goes much faster on those subsequent executions. So in order to do this, we do have a toolkit that helps you to walk through those facilitation options, and being able to facilitate that initial conversation to set the context and understanding. Running through the Measure and Grow workshop, we break that out into three different parts there. The first one, actually facilitating the assessment itself, generally takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on the assessment and how much pre-conversation you've had around understanding the context, and making sure that you as a facilitator are able to describe the context effectively with the group that you're executing the assessment with. Then once we've executed that assessment, then we take about an hour to analyze the results and see what is the information telling us? What are we going to do with this information? And what does it mean for us? What does that look like? And then finally, the third part is actually identifying those improvement options, creating those what we call growth recommendations, and then putting those in our backlog for execution. So this can be done as one big workshop, or it can be done as separate parts that maybe you first come together to facilitate the assessment, then you step away, have some time to go through and analyze those results, and then come back together later to identify those improvement opportunities. And this workshop gives you the base set of slides to be able to go through and facilitate that, the understanding, the facilitation guide, and all of that for being able to do that workshop. So once we've done that, then how do we look at identifying our growth recommendations? What does that look like? So there's a few things that we want to consider when we're analyzing and looking at the data and looking for those growth recommendations. Some of the things that we want to look at is not just, what isn't going well, but let's also look at our strengths. Let's look at those statements where we have the highest scores, where we're actually doing well, and we feel that we're doing well in these areas. These are areas that we can celebrate. We can use that to really drive some energy into the organization of, let's not just focus on the negatives. Let's celebrate the positive things that we're doing well, and be able to understand that it's not all about, oh, we're not doing good. We do need to celebrate. We do need to provide motivation to our people to keep going, and to recognize when they have made those improvements. So looking at those statements with the highest scores on average, and then statements with the largest positive difference compared to a benchmark. And we'll talk about in a little bit how, using comparative agility, you can actually compare to either a world benchmark, an industry benchmark, or other benchmarks of how we're doing compared to others. And again, be able to celebrate that. Look, compared to others in our industry, we're actually doing really well in these areas. And then those statements with the highest amount of agreement. These are statements where we can see that if we have the highest amount of agreement on these statements, we have a low standard deviation there, then that typically gives us information that we do have a good common understanding here, and we do agree on where we're at. So we can understand what that looks like, and that we know that we're communicating well within the organization, that there's a good understanding, and that we agree on either the improvements or how well we've done in those areas. When looking at the opportunities, then again, we want to look at what are those statements with the lowest scores. These are going to be our best opportunities to really be able to make the most movement on and be able to target those. Statements with the largest negative difference against the benchmark. Again, compared to others, we're not doing quite so well in this area. So if we really want to be competitive, we probably should focus on those areas to be able to improve. And then finally, statements with the least amount of agreement. So these are indicators that maybe we haven't done a good job at communicating the context of this area, and we have some disagreement as to either how well or how not well we're doing in a particular area, and we need to investigate and find out, why do we not have a good understanding here? What do we need to do to change our communication and really help bringing together a common understanding in these areas? So those are some of the things that we want to analyze there. Some cautions to have when looking at the data. One, you want to be careful when aggregating data together. When you're looking at a single value to kind of average out what the overall values are, you want to be cautious there, because you could end up with some unintentional conclusions that really aren't valid. So you can see here the joke on the screen about, did you hear the joke of this statistician who drowned while wading across the river with an average depth of 3 feet? Well, yeah, it was average because there was some really shallow areas, but then there was a really, really deep area. And we can end up with the same situation, especially, stepping back and looking at if it happened to be an area where there was a least amount of agreement there. So we might have had a bunch of people, or a few people that were answering that, hey, yeah, we're doing pretty well in this area, when in reality there was some people that understood that, no, we're not doing well in this area, but that got covered up because it got averaged out with those who actually thought that we were. So be careful about aggregating. We do still want to look at kind of those individual areas, understand each response, and be able to dive in a little bit deeper when we see that there's that potential that, hey, there was somebody that indicated that we have a concern in this area, and maybe we want to investigate a little bit more. Okay. Careful about using to rank portfolios against each other, really ranking any teams against each other and stuff. You really have to understand the context, because each one could be facing different issues and different things that they're facing that they need to deal with, and comparing really doesn't benefit anyone there. We have to understand each one in their own context on that. And be careful about following up on too many things at once. So we don't want to try and boil the ocean by tackling everything all at once. We want to pick just those couple areas that we can really make movement on, and then be able to come back around later to tackle some of those other areas once we've made those initial improvements. So once we've analyzed the data and really understand that, then from there we can take those areas and create what we call those growths, those grows or improvement items from those areas. And we want to do that in kind of a multi-step fashion. What we don't want to do is, taking the example on the screen here of teams of agile teams regularly demonstrate integrated solution. And the answer was, well, no, we're not really able to do that. Well, okay, now we're going to tackle, we got to get, everything in place and try and do a full-on integration every week. We want to have that in place and done, and we have to have all the test automation, all the build automation, all the data and everything, and have this great big chunk of work that we try and do at once. Instead, think about what are the growth steps that we can take. First, let's look at, can we just get that integration environment in place for teams to use? Once that's there, maybe it's done manually or whatever, but at least we have the environment there. Then we can take that next step on improvement. Okay, what are those test automations? What are the build automations? What are those things that we can start to build out there and get that in place? And then, finally grow into that third final stage of, okay, we need that synthetic test data in there that needs to be able to give us our accurate testing and all of that. So kind of take that progressive step as we go through each of those areas and try not to do too much all at once. From there, then you can create those actual backlog items. So you can formulate those into those features that then the Agile release trains will pull into their PI planning for, here's the actual improvements that we want to make. And we want to define that, the way we would any other feature. So we want to select and install synthetic test data generation tool. Here's our benefit hypothesis of why we want to do this, why we believe that this is going to be a benefit, and our acceptance criteria around that. Get that in the backlog. Once we have all of those improvement options in the backlog, then we can go through and do just like we do any other feature. We'll do a WSJF calculation on them. We'll be able to calculate that cost of delay against each other and understand what are the items that we want to target first based off of our WSJF calculation, and be able to pull those in to our PI planning sessions then to actually execute against those and make those improvements. And then finally, we actually have, as a wonderful part of comparative agility, the ability on several of the assessments, such as the team and technical agility and the agile product delivery, built into the tool. It will actually extract and give you growth recommendations. So you don't have to come up with all of them on your own. So it actually has, based off of the different statements, what are some of the growth recommendations, what are the different level of improvements that you can make, and it will actually provide those to you. And I think Jorgen might demonstrate that and show us that here shortly. But it really helps simplify that and give you those growth recommendations right away for you to be able to take a look at. So with that, I've been talking for a while. I think it's about time for me to turn it over to Jorgen to give us a demonstration of how comparative agility really simplifies this and makes it easy for us.
Thank you for that, Jim. And one thing I want to say that I really think SAFe did really well here is it really helped to make sure that things like improvement opportunities are given a solid step in terms of the seat at the table, because very often we look at features as, yes, we're definitely going to run some features, we're definitely going to improve how we deliver features, but how we improve how we work is very often not considered. And I think this really helps with that. Measure and grow is all about continuous improvement and using data as a way to do that. And I think ultimately, if you want to be an agile organization, that's super important. So I think SAFe is doing something really important here. So let me show you how this looks in practice. And what I'm going to do is do a very simple simulation. I'm going to use our staging environment, which is essentially a test environment, but it is real data that I can show you now that actually will take you through, I think we can do some two one-to-one sort of end-to-end examples. So the first we'll do is we'll look at the business agility survey. And as you remember from Jim, what he was saying, is in the business agility survey, that's typically a survey that's been taken by leadership. So what you see here in comparative agility, you see a basic structure where we have set up what's considered a typical structure that you might say in very typical SAFe implementations. Here, for instance, you have a product, you have an art, and inside of that art, you have multiple teams. Now, inside those teams, you can then assign surveys. So in this case, we're going to look at a core product, which is fine, but we're going to actually just run this for one of our laces, for instance. So what we can do here is we can add a team. We'll call this the lace, because the lace is going to be one of those teams that will take the business agility survey. So if we go in here and we look for the business agility survey, we can add that capability. And in this case, we can now distribute that survey and collect the results. There's a couple of ways to do this. And you remember from Jim's presentation just a couple of minutes ago, you can do this in many ways. You can collect the data first and then discuss it, or you can send out the survey and then collect the data afterwards and discuss the results once they're there. Now, this is all about preference. I do think there's pros and cons of both, but I think this here, facilitator mode, is a fun way, very interactive way to do it, which means you get data right away and you have a chance to discuss the results. So why don't we try that now? We're live, so we might as well have a little fun with it. So I'm going to run this now. I'm going to start facilitation mode, and then we'll see how this goes. We're going to run it, and I'm inviting you now, you too, Jim, if you want to, and the rest of the people on the call to just kind of try this out. I mean, just to see what we get. So I'm now the facilitator, and we're looking at business agility. And what I'll invite you to do is to take your phone and just kind of highlight, just look at the phone using your app there, looking at your photo app. And what will happen automatically is it will pick up and basically tell you to wait a little bit until the presenter is ready to start. So I'm going to give everyone maybe a few minutes. I see there's 11 people already. So what will happen now is, as a facilitator, I can now choose to start right away if I want to, or I can start to hide the results from the beginning. And that's something I recommend you do. And Jim and I, we can try this together now and see how this works. So we got 12 people. Why don't we do this? We're going to start, and we'll do the first question in the survey, maybe one more thing just to see how this works. And we'll start the survey. So here it is. This is the first question in the business agility survey, and it says, we train our people in agile. All right, so let's see here. Now, you should get that question pop up on your mobile device. You can answer that question however you feel is appropriate for your context. I'm going to answer it myself also, just so we can kind of see how this looks. While people are answering, you as a facilitator can see how many people are responding. You can see here that 10 out of 12 people have responded. So I can choose to wait until everyone has responded, or I can break it off pretty much and say, okay, let's just have this conversation right now. Now, 10 out of 12 people, that's a pretty good response rate. So we don't necessarily have to wait for everyone. And what we'll do now is we'll display those results. And let's say what people said. Okay, look at this. So we have 6 people saying true, that we do train our people in Agile. And then you see a couple more people that are responding as we speak. And then we have a couple here that's more true than false. And then we have a couple here that's not so much there. Well, and to Jim's point, this is where you have to understand the difference, not just in terms of an average, but also look at the distribution of answers. In this case, I think it's pretty clear that most people are saying here that, yes, indeed, we are being trained in Agile. We know that's important to make this work. But at the same point, we see a couple people here that are maybe not so clear on it. At this point, I probably wouldn't make that big of a deal of it. We might just clarify what we mean when we train people in Agile so that there's no misunderstanding. But the point is, this is a chance for everyone now to go and talk about things that could be difficult to talk about. This one, I think, will be a little bit more tricky. We organize our people into cross-functional Agile teams. Now, some people are going to say, well, what's a cross-functional Agile team? For some people, that might actually be unclear. For others, it could be very clear. Either way, here as a facilitator, you can clarify what that term means. Say, okay, when we say cross-functional, we mean everybody required to create value for our customers. Okay, well, can you clarify? Well, that means design. It means DBAs. And you can start having those conversations. Now, when people are starting responding to this, let's see what kind of results we're getting now. You see, what we're seeing here is a little bit more of a distribution. And part of that is that people also are a little bit more unsure of this. This is also a higher bar, I would say. One thing is to train people in Agile. That's relatively simple. But to organize your people in cross-functional Agile teams, not so simple. That's a little bit more advanced. Either way, this is a great opportunity for us to have that conversation and to talk to our people about it. And just like Jim said, talk about the backlog items that we're going to create as a result of this, the growth. What are we going to do to improve how we work going forward? So I just wanted to show you this. One thing that I love is that if you do this as a start, what you will notice is that you have really engaging conversations. At the same time, it will take some time, and you might not be able to get through 60 questions doing it this way. What you can do, though, is you can click on this X here. When you do that, you can choose how you want to proceed. If you want to keep this active, you can send it out separately, not as a facilitator mode session, but as a separate survey that people can take asynchronously. That means that you can have a synchronous session, start off as a workshop, And then if you want to, you can send a link to everybody. And what will happen is that when people open up that link, they will start from the question that we left off. So that's a really great way to do it. You can also save the information and close the survey. That means that we end it at this point. That's also fine, especially if you're not going to look for the whole survey. And then you can, of course, cancel the survey also without saving it if you just want to do an impromptu session. But in this case, I'm going to keep the survey active and we'll continue later. This is all good. Now we have respondents that we already tracked and we're ready now to continue. So I just want to show you how that part works. Now let's get to the next part. Now that we have collected data, what we can start to do now is do the analysis. And to do that, we go to the analysis screen, and I'm going to start with business agility because just like Jim said, that's a good place to start. Remember that roadmap that he was showing you. Now let's do this. And we're looking at what we're having here. We have the core product, we have the art, and then we have a couple of teams underneath that. Well, I'm going to see and do now. What I might do is like, how do I do this? How about I do the core product? Look at that, do a quick switch and see if I can just look at how we're doing compared to the world index itself. And what we can see, if we run a simple solution here in the world index here, we can see that there are some differences that go across different areas. This is good. You can start to see where some challenges might be. Technical practices have some challenges. You can see that there's some other items. If you look at, for instance, averages, you can see technical practices are the ones that they're really suffering. This is all good from a start. You know, the important part here is not so much to get actionable, but it's to understand where you are so you can start to make that be part of how you define your strategy. But if we want to get more detailed, what we can do is we can go to team and technical agility. See if I can find that survey down in here, team and technical agility here. And if we look at this now, we're now going away from the strategy, from the LACE, from the technical leaders, down to the actual teams. And let's run that survey. So now we're looking at TTA or Division A. And let's see what we find now. Now, what gets interesting here is that you now see a little different picture, and why things are not so great here now is because we're looking specifically at technical practices, not the full picture, and we're looking at the team perspective. So here we can start to see where there might be some challenges. Now, what's good about this is that we can start to say now, okay, we're starting to see where the challenges are, and we can also start to look at how these teams are relating to each other. If we look at the impact matrix, for instance, we're looking at the very sectors that Jim was talking about, performance on the x-axis and cohesion on the y-axis, which is a measurement of, division inside the team. So here we can start to see that with all the teams in this art and in this division, we can start to see that the teams in the green zone are the teams that have high performance and high cohesion. That means they're doing fairly well and they're on the same page. That's a good thing. We want to amplify this. So the strategy here is to say, well, let's do more of this. Let's observe what they're doing. Let's share it. Let's have brown bag lunches. Let's celebrate what they're doing. This is good stuff. Then if we look at the align section here, high performance, low cohesion, that means the teams are doing fairly well, but they're not on the same page. These are teams that may disagree with each other on things like CI or definition of done, or even more elementary things. These are usually leading indicators of poor performance. So I would keep an eye on this and try to align them. Make sure they understand what's going on and make sure we don't have those misunderstandings that can lead to poor performance down the road. Now, sometimes we get some teams in the improve quadrant. It doesn't happen too often, but this means low performance, high cohesion. That means they're not doing so well, but they know they're not doing so well. So usually they're able to do this themselves. They need to improve, but they know it. So sometimes you may have to do something to help them out, but usually these teams can handle it themselves. Now that is not the case for teams here in the mitigate. So this is the red zone. Low performance, low cohesion. These are teams that are not doing well, and at the same time, they're perceiving that they're all over the place. So they really need to be mitigated. As coaches and as change leaders, it is our responsibility to help them. They need some help. So how do we help them? Well, now you understand how each of these teams relate to each other. That in itself is important because that can help you prioritize your efforts. Just like Jim said earlier, you can't boil the ocean, so you can't help every team with the same level of gusto and impact for each of them. you need to see which teams you need to focus on first. This is all depending on your staffing and what kind of coaching resources you have. But let's say you want to start where it really matters. How about Team Thor or Black Widow? If you open up this, you double click on that particular dot, we will open up that one particular team and see how they're doing. And now, as you can see, this is a very different picture. They're not doing so great at all. Now, just like we can do, and we can look at these different graphs, we can also start to look at the statements and the insights within them. We can look at the key strengths to see where they're doing okay, but even that, they're not doing so great. And then you can look at key opportunities. And more importantly, and this is what Jim was talking about, you can also look at recommendations. Here you can look at growth recommendations that are coming directly from SAFe, and it tells you that, okay, here's the statement that you scored fairly poorly on. Here are the things you can do next. So just to give you an example, our team achieves alignment with the other teams and stakeholders as a result of PI planning. That's a core mission of that particular section. Now, what are the recommendations? Well, as the RTE, watch the business owners in SAFe. Look at this video, the business owners in SAFe video. Use the questions to determine whether you have the appropriate business owners represented in the art. These are really sensible recommendations. Use the PI planning overview. So those are things that are available in SAFe Studio. And then ultimately here, over time, ensure that any additional business owners have an opportunity to attend leading SAFe training, which is a basic training that you need to do this successfully. So then you can also see what you can expect when you do it. And on top of that, you get a direct link to a resource in SAFe Studio. Here, for instance, you will have access to a video, which is the video I referenced earlier, business owners in SAFe. If you go through and look at the other elements here, all depends on what kind of recommendations you need. You will see that there are specific recommendations that will take you to elements of SAFe Studio. And this doesn't end. There's so many of these that's really quite, I think, flexible and diverse in the type of tools you get. So you get to see this from many different perspectives, which I think is really useful. You can see knowledge articles, videos. Sometimes you can even see tools. Like in this case here, I see what we're looking at here. We're looking at a SAFe Studio element, and now we're looking at a product launch that they have and some of the toolkits that are available. This is all there. So I think this is really useful. Again, it doesn't take the job of the coach, but it does do something in terms of accelerating your effectiveness. It just makes it easier for you to get this going much faster. So that's one of the things I just wanted to show you as you see how Measure and Grow helps you as an organization improve how you work. You can take those measurements, make that part of the growth, and then later on as product backlogs into your PI planning and later on how you execute your work. Because I think one of the things that we haven't done so well when it comes to Agile in general is that we focus so much on features and sometimes we just forget improvement opportunities. And at the end of the day, that's what Agile is all about. We want to be a little bit better today than we were yesterday. So that's what I wanted to show you. One more thing I wanted to just point out that when you share your screen there, Jim, is that you can actually now go and get some free teams right away if you go to the SAFe Studio. So what you will see on the screen now is a QR code. And that particular QR code, I think it's the next slide here, that will give you a chance to get 5 free teams, which is a great value, $2,500. The one thing you need as a requirement is you need to have a SAFe Studio account. But if you have that, just look at that QR code. You can use that right away, and you can get straight to the page there on the SAFe Studio page, and you can activate your membership, and you will get 5 free teams. And it's unlimited in terms of usage. So you can do this for as many people as you like within the 5-team allocation. So just wanted to show you that one. And if this is going too fast and you didn't have a chance to click the link, we will give you that also in the Q&A later on if you have any questions. And with that, I think that was all we had for now. And Amra, if you have any questions for us, we'll be happy to try to answer as many as we can.